Welcome to Storycraft Portal, where every story uncovers hidden truths and unseen betrayals. In a world where trust should be sacred, sometimes the deepest wounds are carved by the hands we hold dearest. Today, we bring you the haunting tale of a decorated detective whose perfect life unraveled with a single gunshot. Beneath the surface of smiles and public admiration, a storm of secrets was brewing. Secrets powerful enough to shatter lives. When love turns into deception and promises are broken by silent motives, the heartache is beyond repair. Stay with us as we dive into a story where loyalty was just a mask and betrayal wore a familiar face. This is not just a case. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the real danger lives within our own homes. Welcome to the story of Brian and Amy Fanion, a tale where love ended in blood. The day began like any other, but by evening, the Fanion household would be drenched in irreversible tragedy. Amy Fanion, the loving wife of Detective Brian Fanion, was found dead inside their cozy dining room. The gunshot echoed through the empty halls, leaving behind a chilling silence. Brian's trembling voice flooded the 911 call center, his words broken and frantic. He claimed an argument had shattered their peace, leading Amy to pull the trigger on herself. Yet, the crime scene told a colder story. The room was too neat, the sorrow too scripted. Officers, though sympathetic, exchanged uncertain glances as they surveyed the scene. Neighbors whispered in shock. How could this happen in a house that once overflowed with laughter? Brian, a man of law and honor, now stood under a dark, invisible cloud. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was the beginning of a nightmare no one saw coming. Detective Brian Fanion's life began to crumble as quickly as his perfect marriage was called into question. As the police dug deeper into the case, it became clear that there was more than met the eye. Neighbors who had once admired the couple now spoke of odd tensions between Brian and Amy in the weeks leading up to her death. Brian's colleagues, still reeling from the tragedy, began to notice strange behavior. He was far too calm for a man who had just lost his wife. As the investigation progressed, the officers uncovered details that were hard to ignore. Amy had been hiding her own secrets, and Brian, perhaps, had more to lose than anyone realized. Questions began to swirl. Was it a lover's quarrel gone too far? Or had Brian orchestrated the perfect crime, masking it as a tragic accident? As the case intensified, so did the investigation into Brian's personal life. The police uncovered a web of lies, secrets, and hidden relationships that Brian had worked so hard to protect. It wasn't just his marriage that was under scrutiny. His extramarital affair with a fellow officer came to light. The revelation sent shockwaves through the department. Brian's affair had been going on for months, an affair that had deeply disturbed Amy. It was clear now, the love that once seemed unbreakable had started to fray at the edges. The cracks in their relationship became more evident as detectives uncovered texts and emails filled with resentment. But still, Brian insisted that Amy's death was a suicide. His story had not changed. Yet, with every passing day, it became more difficult to ignore the mounting evidence that pointed to something far darker. The investigation into Brian's affair only added fuel to the fire. As detectives examined every lead, it became clear that there was more than just one betrayal at play. The question on everyone's mind was whether Amy had discovered the affair before her death. Some of her friends revealed that she had become withdrawn in the weeks leading up to her death, her once vibrant personality dulled by something, perhaps a deep sense of betrayal. The police found traces of gunshot residue on Brian's clothing, something they had missed in the initial investigation. It wasn't just the affair anymore. The evidence was pointing towards something far worse. Had Brian staged the scene to make it look like a suicide? Or had Amy truly ended her own life, consumed by the weight of it all? The investigation was now at a crossroads, and there was no turning back. Brian's calm demeanor during the investigation began to crack. His affair, the evidence of gunshot residue, and his lack of genuine grief became more damning as each piece of the puzzle fit into place. Detectives began to focus on the key piece of the mystery. the gunshot wound that had taken Amy's life. It was too clean, too precise. Had she truly taken her own life? Or was this an execution-style murder masked as a suicide? The more they dug, the clearer it became that Brian had something to hide. The affair, his secretive behavior, and the mounting evidence suggested a darker truth. He wasn't just a husband grieving the loss of his wife. He was a man hiding a deadly secret, one that might unravel everything he had worked for. The case was reaching its tipping point, and soon, the world would know the truth. With each new revelation, Brian's facade began to crumble. The police had everything they needed: the affair, the gunshot residue, the contradictory statements. And it was clear now, Brian had orchestrated the murder of his wife. The motive was simple. He wanted to be free, to live the life he had secretly been planning with his mistress. Amy had been a burden, a woman who knew too much and had grown suspicious. With the evidence piling up against him, Brian finally cracked. In a confession, he revealed the chilling truth. It was not a suicide, but a calculated murder. He had staged the entire scene, making it look like Amy had taken her own life in a fit of despair. His affair had pushed him to the edge, and now, with the confession on record, the case was finally closed. As Brian's confession spread like wildfire, the small town of Massachusetts was left in disbelief. People couldn't fathom that a man they had once respected had hidden such darkness behind his badge. His colleagues in the department felt betrayed. Brian had been a symbol of integrity, and now he was the very embodiment of deceit. The police force scrambled to piece together the timeline of events leading up to Amy's tragic death. Investigators pieced together Brian's motives, his affair, his plans to start a new life, and his calculated actions to silence Amy. The entire town felt betrayed, and the once tight community fractured under the weight of the truth. No one could escape the shadow of what had happened, not even Brian's mistress, who now faced scrutiny herself. As the case continued, it was clear that the scars of this tragedy would run deep for years to come. With the confession in hand, the court trial for Brian Fanion became a public spectacle. His wife's family, heartbroken and seeking justice, watched as their daughter's killer faced the consequences of his actions. The prosecution painted a vivid picture of the cruel and calculated murder that Brian had orchestrated. The details of his affair, his lies, and his attempts to cover up the crime were laid bare for everyone to see. Brian sat in the courtroom, his once proud posture now slumped in defeat. As the defense tried to argue that he had acted under extreme emotional distress, the jury was unmoved. The facts were clear, and the town's anger grew with every passing day. For Amy's family, justice had become a bitter necessity, and though they would never have their loved one back, they were determined to make sure Brian paid for the destruction he had caused. The tension in the courtroom reached its peak as closing arguments began. The defense tried to paint Brian as a victim of circumstances, a man driven to desperation by an affair and a broken marriage. But the jury saw through the facade. The emotional turmoil of betrayal and guilt was no excuse for taking a life. The weight of Amy's death hung heavily in the air. As the jury deliberated, Brian sat in silence, his once proud identity as a detective shattered. He was no longer the man the town had once looked up to. When a verdict was finally delivered, there was a brief moment of silence before the courtroom erupted. Guilty. Brian's fate was sealed, and with it, the end of a long and painful chapter for Amy's family. The truth, however painful, had finally been recognized, and justice had been served, though it did little to heal the wounds left behind. The trial came to a close, but the scars of the past would never fade. Brian Fanion was sentenced to life in prison without parole, a fate that seemed too small for the depth of his betrayal. As the courtroom doors closed behind him, the town could finally breathe again, though they would never forget the darkness that had tainted their community. Amy's family, though broken, had found a sense of peace in knowing that justice had been served. For them, there was no closure, only the painful acceptance of a life lost too soon. The story of Brian and Amy Fanion was a reminder that even those we trust the most can shatter our world in an instant. The case may have been closed, but the memory of it would live on, a testament to the truth that sometimes betrayal hides in plain sight.